Okay, ready? So with Mr. R, we're going to practice a little bit with our loose leash walking, but I also want to throw in a little bit with some of those fronts and side or finish positions. So again, we were doing this a little bit with Mr. F as well, just breaking up some of these snacks a little bit smaller for the handsome guy. So when we go to practice, again, we want to make sure that we're feeding throughout our practice behaviors. So if, let's say, loose leash walking is something that Mr. R is splendid at, I would still make sure to reinforce him through praise, touch, exploration, and of course food, which he finds very, very motivational. So for working these fronts, I sometimes like to start off with my puppy in front of me. You can go right into loose leash walking and then work some fronts, but I like to go ahead and practice having him come into my space and feed for those approaches. So in the beginning, we're just simply getting him to move forward. It can eventually turn into this beautiful sit and settle with our lovely front behavior. Ready? So in the beginning, our food is helping create the response. So as we're walking, we might slow down, then bring him into our front position. Yes, and go right into feeding for the full front, which could be also in a sitting position versus a stand. So when working with this front behavior, some people have called it come front. I prefer to just call it front because in the beginning, I really want you guys to think about each cue having its own meaning. So what I mean by that is come is typically the word I would use for recall. So I would kind of take a note as to what slogans you guys use when practicing at home and make sure the whole household is keeping it consistent. Because if, for example, everybody in the house is using a different slogan or a different cue word, it can get a bit trying for the pup to realize what you'd like them to do. Ready? So for example, with Mr. R, we could be practicing our loose leash walking. Maybe all of a sudden company comes over, there's a distraction. We can then bring our puppy back into a front position. So then you could work a little bit with some eyes or some focus, get those eye contact moments. You could go from the front into maybe some find it if you wanted to add a little bit of movement behaviors again, if that helps your pup become more comfortable. And also diffuse their energy off of a different thing, be it another human that came into the bedroom or into the room. We want to make sure that if, let's say, things are difficult for your pup, that we're giving them venues to do other skills, especially if we tend to just say no to things. Remember, no doesn't tell your babe what you'd rather. So always think to yourself, okay, if I don't like what my dog or my puppy is doing, what would I prefer? And of course, show your puppy those skills so they can start to do those instead of other behavior. So let's say with Mr. R, again, we're going to do a little bit with this front, and then we're going to bring him back into our side position. So I like to bring him into front, and you can in the beginning add a few extra steps. Eventually, it would be, again, a nice little front, and he'd be closer and closer to you. But don't worry if in the beginning he's a little bit further away. So then from the front position to go into side or finish, I'd recommend to get your food at ready. He is a bit of a longer dog, so I might actually, as I get his attention, take my foot, put a step back, bring him, he's like, I think you'd like to have a down. If your puppy gets a little confused and they go into another behavior, simply just get them up by tossing some food and regain their focus. So I'm going to try again with Mr. R to see if we can get a little bit from our front position into the side position. So for side, I want him to actually just follow the food, loop around, and then be back to the side of my body. And whichever side he was working on that loose leash walking, I'd pick a side and rotate later as he becomes more fluid. So again, we're going to bring him into my front. So again, the front of my body, feed for that. I do want to make sure that, again, when he's going to the side, I might lure him with the food, try to bring him a little further out. You can see that he is a bit of a longer dog, so sometimes you might, in the beginning, take a few steps to help him line up with your body. If you're finding he's, again, just having a real hard time with the finish or side position, help him out by maybe luring him there in the beginning. So again, we get that lovely front. He says, lady, I dropped one of those bad boys. So now from the front position, we're going to see if we can add a little bit of movement. He's like, lady, I'm exhausted. We'll add a little bit of movement and bring him to the side of the leg. Chewing is a little bit tricky sometimes when we're panting. Good job. So the benefit of having the side position or finish, whichever you want to call it, is that now you could continue on your merry way with your walk. If you only do fronts to then walking again, that's also okay, but you may find you have to readjust yourself around the puppy versus the pup sometimes readjusting around you. So remember that the more little tricks, or again, parlor tricks they can have, the more you have different behaviors to have them offer versus maybe getting overly exuberant, ready, sit, versus maybe getting very mouthy or too excited. So view it as not so much always trick training, even though that is super fun, but make it where you're almost giving him something to do instead of the original. Ready? So we'll do a little find it. He's doing a great job. Nice. Find it. Gorgeous. Mr. R, you're doing beautiful. Nice. Find it. What a good boy.